I was very sick and tired. It's been 20 years of on and off drug and alcohol use, always kind of bouncing from one thing to the next. I was high on ecstasy every day at work.
What would you say was like a pivotal, culminating event that maybe one of the times you attempted sobriety?
It's like, was I going to let my addiction run the show, or kind of like, was I going to do something about it and make sure that my journey to LA actually was gonna have a chance of success?
Did it ever get dark for you?
Yeah, it did.
What'd that look like?
It looked like something that I could no longer control.
Labeled a slow learner.
I always felt a little bit
Always felt
different.
like there was something wrong with me.
embarrassed.
Wasn't ready to see myself. I can't go any lower.
Don't sell yourself short.
Uncovering all those feelings. Everything was lifted at that moment.
This really wasn't about not drinking.
Hi, I'm Corey Rabin. Welcome to Crosstalk Podcast. I'm really excited. We have a great episode. And the incredible thing is here, I have this lady named Irene Lignos who's going to interview Sean with us. Hi.
Hi.
What's going on?
How are you, Corey?
You ready for another LA session?
I am. This is really a marathon, but it's been worth it.
Oh, it's the best. And we have people throughout this LA trip in the music business. Mm-hmm. And this interview is no exception. I'm really excited that Sean G is with us.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, how you doing, Glenn?
Thank you.
I'm doing really well.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about, who you are, where you're from. How did it all begin?
Yeah, sure. Originally from the Bay Area. Again, my name is Sean Grand. I'm an artist manager here in Los Angeles.
What's the company you manage called?
It's Adjacent.LA. That would be my boutique management company. We're based in downtown Los Angeles. Shout out DTLA. I manage a gold certified producer, Zaro Vega. He is a multi-genre producer, executive producer, super talented guy. I'm originally from the Bay Area, like I mentioned. Grew up in a split household. Parents never married. Dad's from Eastern Europe, came here as a refugee to the States. Mom's from LA. And so kind of spent time between both households growing up. A little bit of travel out of state, out of country. Speak Hungarian. Ate a lot of Hungarian food growing up. Got good exposure to the world growing up, which is something I'm really grateful for. And grateful for all four of my parents. Wouldn't be the person that I am today if it weren't for all four of them.
I just want to understand, you said you grew up in a split household, meaning
yes,
that mom lived one place with a spouse.
Yes. Dad
lived another place with a spouse, but in the same community.
In the same community, yeah. We moved around a lot with my mom. My stepdad came into the picture, and my stepmom did as well when I was about 5, and they were there. They've been there throughout the entire journey. So just a lot of bouncing back and forth,
Great. So you went to school in the Bay Area?
I did, yeah. Public education, did a little bit of private school, and college.
Did there come a time when you dabbled into drugs and alcohol, and when was that?
It was young. I think I first started smoking weed around 13. I was already smoking a couple packs of cigarettes a day at 13 in Eastern Europe. That was where I started smoking cigarettes. Hawaii is where I first smoked weed, but it didn't kind of like evolve and get more serious until it was in California and whatnot.
Did you go away for the summer to Eastern Europe?
Eastern Europe, yeah, we'd go during the summer predominantly. I'd go to Hawaii during opposing summers or winters, when we weren't going to Eastern Europe.
And did you drink when because I grew up going to Greece in the summer, and we would stay for months, and at 12, 13, same Mary, I was smoking cigarettes, so very
how it is.
Familiar.
Yeah.
And I was drinking, not a lot, but I was, allowed to.
Right.
So I did. It wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And that's where it all began. Do you have a similar experience that, because you're in Europe, the drinking age is younger and...
Yeah, absolutely, Irene. I mean, it was fun. I was not allowed to. My dad's super strict. Real old school. My mom, that household, much more, like I said, from LA, much more like a hippie type vibe. So very different, which is something that perhaps we can get into a little later. But when I was over there in Europe, it was always with my pops. So I was sneaking, what I was doing at first. I mean, I was a good kid, always studious. School was easy for me. I didn't have to try super hard, but I was a big skateboarder. I remember getting offered a cigarette when I was at a skate park when I was young in Cali. I said no. But when I was in Europe this one summer, then, a good buddy of mine, he just kind of like pressured me into doing it. And sure as shit, by the end of the summer, I was smoking 2 packs of Reds at 13, finishing up the day, finding some type of, perfume, deodorant type of thing to spray on myself and get home before my dad would yell at me.
I'm laughing because I'm now a non-smoker, and I have been for years, but I can smell a cigarette on somebody from a mile away. And I think to myself, all those years that I sprayed perfume thinking that like no one would know. And I could just imagine that like my mom was like, "You're an idiot."
I mean, I think back on it now and I'm like, how did he not know? I mean, we were going out to bars,
Yeah.
I remember
He
going
knew.
I mean, he must have known,
Yeah.
but like, I just knowing my dad, like, how did he not whoop my ass or like say something? I'm thoroughly confused
How
by
could
this.
you afford 2 packs a day at that age?
I mean, it was
They were
even
like
it was
$2
cheap over
in
there.
Europe.
Yeah. I mean, get a little money from
It's still
from my
cheap.
dad. Oh yeah, for
Now you need a
sure.
mortgage to get cigarettes in the
In
U.S.
New York, yeah.
Tell me about it. It's like paying double rent.
You
You
don't
know?
smoke still, do you?
I do.
2 packs of Reds?
No. I do smoke, but nowhere in that capacity. I have quit different times. I've quit for multiple years, but it's just sort of like that typical, you're out, you're having a good time, drinking usually, and somebody offers you one or you ask for one, and or you start with just taking a drag, and pretty soon you're asking for one, and you're bumming another. And
So tell us a little bit more about, you grew up kind of traveling, so you're a bit of a world traveler, going
Yeah.
to both sides of the globe.
mm-hmm.
And sort of kind of starting to do some antisocial behavior. And how does it develop into doing drugs?
Well, I remember we used to buy weed from our dealer, and he didn't have any, and it would be late at night. We would it'd be my buddies over at my house, and they were allowed to come over. My mom always created a safe space for us. Bless her heart, she only ever had the best intentions, but we had a lot of freedom, so we used it. We would take one of their cars. We didn't have licenses. We'd go buy weed, and we'd come back. But like I said, one night my dealer didn't have weed. He had ecstasy. So I'm sitting there with my buddy, and we're kind of thinking about it. We're pretty young. We're kind of scared, and we want to get high so bad that we just did it, and it ended up being really fun. It was one of those kind of things where everything I grew up with, a lot of anxiety, stress in the household, I felt normal. And I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be normal. That's what I thought.
When you say normal, meaning you were no longer stressed out, you were no longer anxious, you
Yeah.
felt comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah. I just felt enthusiastic, and
You love everyone.
yeah, I didn't have this sense of this pessimism. There's a lot of pessimism in one of my households, so it created a lot of anxiety for me, a lot of stress that I still deal with on today. So when I started doing that, I really felt like, wow, I feel like I'm enjoying talking to people more. I'm I'm probably more fun to be around, all these things. So I figured out a way to be able to take it every day, to the point where when I was 16, I was working at as a server. I was high on ecstasy every day at work. And then, in the process, we started dabbling with, other drugs as well. And, it was just sort of what we could get our hands on, Yeah. Yeah. By the time I got into college, I was starting to experiment with Xanax. That became like my go-to. Again, I just noticed, anxiety I was feeling wasn't there. I just felt so good. So that was a lot. I felt easier on my brain than taking ecstasy all the time. So
I guess I'm jumping ahead a little, but it seems like a common thread that you keep mentioning is anxiety.
yes.
And, I suffer from anxiety as well. And I've learned now different ways to handle it. And it's like gone up and down in sobriety. There have been more intense times than others. How do you handle your anxiety today?
I mean, it's a constant struggle. I think my confidence has grown a lot. Like I said, this journey of coming to LA, a lot of it was to pursue my dreams as, a business-minded person working with creatives, which kind of like evolved more into artist management. But a big part of it as well was just to kind of like start fresh and get away from, everything that I grew up with at home, and just kind of figure out who I was. And in that process, it's been rocky. There have been a lot of ups, there have been a lot of downs. That freedom wasn't necessarily the best thing in certain ways too. But overall, my confidence has risen a lot, as I have figured out more of who I am, what I stand for, what I like about myself, what I represent, and what my purpose is on the planet. And that's really helped me. I don't care as much what other people think as I used to think. I used to care a lot about what other people thought, their validation, all of that. It's not that I don't care about people, I do. But trying to live, a super, kind of happy life, I think focusing a lot on, other people's view of you, or evaluating yourself based on what ifs and all of that versus how you feel about yourself, and just knowing yourself and what you bring to the table is a whole different can of worms. So that's been something that's been big for me. I think that, my childhood created those, created that anxiety. It created that desire for validation, that in some cases I didn't get, in one of my households. I also work out. I do have a therapist. I do go to AA. These are things that help me with my anxiety relating to other people. Being here with you guys right now actually helps me a lot. Just to know, I don't need to feel like the crazy person in the room, talking about all of this.
Tell us more about, you're growing up, you're breaking the rules, you are traveling the world. Like, how do things start to unfold in your 20s? Like, did you go to college?
I did. Yeah, I did. Was pretty avid. I was a good student. My dad was just, school all the time. So, and school was pretty easy for me, like I mentioned. So
Business major?
Business major, yeah, entrepreneurship. My dad's an entrepreneur. He's he came here with nothing. He was a machinist, started a machining business and invested in real estate, and did very well for himself. And I'm really proud of that story. I grew up, really proud of that. It's the American dream. And I think anyone can do it. And that's why I'm very empathetic of people. I also am a no bullshit type of person. But that said, I really admired his story growing up, and with that I wanted to kind of follow in his footsteps. So yeah, I studied business, studied entrepreneurship, got my MBA, also in entrepreneurship, straight after my undergrad, and then went into the work world. I did 3 internships before finishing my MBA, and then went out in the job market. Operations, early stage finance, and sales and marketing. So I kind of, was trying different things out.
But you were using on and off during this whole period?
I was drinking a lot then. I went to an undergrad where it was really great socially, and I had an amazing time. And it's a good school, and it was a good business program. Kids weren't that studious, though. It's a big party school.
Where'd you go?
Chico State.
Okay.
Chico State. Again, it was a good education, and I was involved in some really great things there that shaped me into more of the leader that I am becoming. Going to Pacific was a big thing for me. It's a private school in Stockton. Kids really study there. I was like, oh wow, this is very different. 18-month intensive program, straight out of undergrad.
This was for your MBA?
This was for my MBA, no work experience before that, just straight out of high school. So I really felt like pushed to go through my education, and part of me really wanted to, and my stepdad's actually the one that encouraged me to get my MBA. And at the same time, I just felt like I was running. I realized that there was a lot of time that I spent being studious that other kids were spending being social. And so they were better at socializing than me. Or maybe there were just certain experiences that I didn't have growing up because my father was so strict, that they had, kind of on average. So I just noticed kids were kind of more social than me.
Let me just ask you something.
Yeah.
You said something. You said, I felt like I was always running.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I felt like I was always in school. I felt like I was always moving towards a successful career. Yeah, a goal. I mean, I didn't necessarily know what that was yet, but that was all I cared about. That was all I thought was important. That's what I was told to do.
So how has I remember hearing about party mode phases.
Yeah, back to that.
So, we're talking about all this good progress, scholastically, degrees, internships. I want to hear a little bit about how your progress was perhaps impacted by the phases, the different phases that you went through from a drug and alcohol standpoint.
Yeah. It hasn't been all, sunshine and whatever the
roses.
Sunshine and roses,
I think so.
Thank you. Yeah, it really hasn't been. I mean, I am a highly functional user, of any substance that I do use. You're not going to be able to tell till it gets to a certain point. And I'm going to use that substance as a performance enhancer. And so that's what I did. I had heard that, there's all these I don't know who I heard this from, and I don't even know if it's true, but there's all these really smart people getting their PhDs who are using drugs, to enhance their performance and stuff like that. And I'm noticing to myself that, like I said, anxiety, stuff like that's kind of more at bay. And I don't know. I mean, I can just sit down and do work, I can get through the day, just fine. So
you're talking about now on drugs or
drugs,
better off
alcohol. Now I don't
Even
use
better.
anything.
Right.
I mean, it's this journey of okay, it's been 20 years of on and off drug and alcohol use. Always kind of bouncing from one thing to the next, having to deal with the ups and downs, of that constantly, the hangovers, the withdrawals, the money, all of that, to just, really finally getting to a place in my life later than I would have hoped, to be honest, where I'm much more comfortable in my shoes, just being here without anything except for, a cup of coffee or water, so
So
it hasn't been all sunshine and roses.
Did you feel like it's easier now for you to do all the things you want to do without any of those enhancers?
At this point, definitely. If you would have asked me when I was kind of like mid-swing, I probably would have said no, because I hadn't reached the tipping point. But when you start to really like see it on yourself, and when it starts to impact your relationships with different people, I started to see it kind of like, where maybe people could tell, or maybe mentally I wasn't in my best place, and maybe that came across, but people didn't know why, or,
did it ever get dark for you?
Yeah, it did. It got really dark.
What'd that look like?
It looked like something that I could no longer control. It was the first time in my life where I felt like I might not be able to get myself out of this hole. I was using ketamine super heavily. And it actually is something that helped me a lot in the beginning. And I know it's studied, and I know there can be benefits. I don't know if they're long-term or not, but I was convinced that it was the thing for me forever. But like anything else, I couldn't moderate my dosage,
Neither could Matthew Berry.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever benefit it had, it got to a certain point where it wasn't doing that anymore. And I was spending a lot of money on it. And I was watching, all my savings from working, not all of it, but a good amount of it going into that, as I'm simultaneously pursuing being an entrepreneur.
What would you say, and maybe you're getting to this, but what would you say was like a pivotal culminating event that was one of the times you attempted sobriety?
I mean, a lot of it came down to money, and having to, it's like, was I going to let my addiction run the show, or kind of like, was I going to do something about it and make sure that my journey to LA actually was gonna have a chance of success? So that's kind of what it took for me.
That's only something that high functioning addicts and alcoholics can do.
Okay.
I don't think anybody who's completely off the rails isn't thinking logically about that. And I identify with that. Some of the best things that I've done were actually when I relapsed. From a business standpoint, I wasn't completely insane. I felt like shit physically.
Yeah.
I was not taking care of myself.
Right.
And, the relationships I had were completely built on lies and flim flam, some kind of thing of explaining why I fell asleep at dinner last night. It had nothing to do with Oxy.
No, of course
it was
not.
just I just had a bad dream last night, and I was thinking about it, and I went back to sleep. I was thinking, who the hell knows what I was? All lies, all bullshit.
You didn't fall asleep in your Chinese food like I did on Christmas?
I may have done that. But speaking of lies and bullshit,
Yeah, just saying.
I know one of the things that, Sean, you want to talk about is how important trustworthiness,
yes,
ethical behavior, and transparency is to you today. You're in your first year, almost midway through your first year of sobriety.
Yeah.
And those are the ideals, the goals, the things that you want to show in your own life. Why is that so important to you?
I mean, as representing people's careers in the music industry is something that they, to represent you, you've got to trust somebody a lot, and for other people to want to work with you, you've got to be a solid person. There's a lot of people that dabble, that party, that have a good time. It's not uncommon. It's not like, I mean, I made it a long way, keeping it a secret, but I want to take my career and my client's career to the next level. And I know that I need to be my best self in order for the universe to, to allow that. And that's part of what I've seen and how I view this journey. Even when I made mistakes, I knew that the universe was guiding me in a different way, even if I didn't correct my behavior, because I saw opportunities coming up again to do it and again to do it. And if I didn't take them, then it became a harder and harder lesson. And like I said, I pushed it all the way to the end, to where maybe not the end, but it was at a pretty difficult stage
It
when
felt
I finally
that
made
way.
a choice.
So what
Yeah.
happened? I mean, like, you are high functioning.
Yeah,
Sounds like you're pretty successful.
thanks.
I mean, before even.
Yeah, more
And
successful
so-
than probably.
Yeah, well, it's, if you measure success by money only, I guess.
That's a good point.
But as you said, money isn't everything. But what happened?
it's not.
Did you have an intervention? Did someone stop you? Did you go to treatment? It sounds like you have a similar family situation to me, and I don't know if your family is like mine, but there was a stigma to therapy. There was a
Oh,
stigma
yeah.
to, like, they were like, wait, rehab, but they knew I needed it.
Yeah,
So did you have that experience?
I did have that experience. My dad, he has no idea, to my knowledge.
Well, hello, Dad.
Yeah, hopefully he never sees this. But if he does, then let it be told.
Hopefully you'll help more people than.
That would be the goal. Either way, at this point in my life, I think, I'm just ready to be exactly who I am. And, it can't come at the cost of my authenticity, to keep secrets any longer, because that's what I was doing.
What did the demise look like?
It was a trip to see my mom and my stepdad, and I was drinking a lot. Wasn't using hard drugs in that moment. But again, it's always just been kind of one or the other. So I just wasn't myself. They didn't, they didn't like the way I was behaving. I was very defensive about it. And my mom just said, you need to go to AA. So I had already quit ketamine at that point, again. But I moved right into, or continued with the drinking. So at that point, I'm like, oh God, I don't even have this to lean on now. Okay, this is really it, She's telling me to do this. I don't think I've ever not listened to my mom, So I said, all right. And I just
That was
started
about
going.
6 months ago almost.
Yeah, it
That's
was.
pretty cool that
Thanks.
she kind of knew where to lead you.
Yeah, she's a huge blessing in my life. I would be a complete mess without my mom.
So you didn't go to formal treatment or anything like that. You went to AA.
Yeah,
I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
I have to say.
When did you start therapy?
therapy has been a huge help. I started about 1.5 years ago, and it's been amazing. LA Christian Health Centers.
Did the
are
therapist ever
amazing.
suggest AA?
No, interestingly.
Were you telling the therapist what you were doing?
I was, yeah. But we never really talked about alcohol. It was ketamine use, and to their knowledge, which for a long portion of that time I had quit because I was working with this intern, therapist there, or someone interning working to become a therapist, and I had quit. I said I was going to quit. I've always been that type of person, so I did. And I had her support, and those around me, but eventually I relapsed.
So how has this journey so far been? Because, you seem really just very self-aware, very far along, in my opinion. It's almost like you got here before you got here.
Thanks. I don't know, I really appreciate what you're saying. I don't, necessarily always feel that way. I don't know. It's great to hear other people's experiences, such as yourselves. Um, I am taking it day by day. I don't plan to go back. I have been vocal about it. I think we talked about that earlier, right? Sharing it with people. I'm really committed to what I'm doing. I am, I'm just not willing to let it keep me from, my dreams at the end of the day. So,
How's physical fitness impact your ability to stay at a good in a
Yeah.
good space?
yeah, it's huge. It's super important. I worked out heavy for about a year. I kind of tapered off. And I can feel the difference. I've started again. It just hasn't been as consistent. It hasn't been 5 times a week. I've been going like, 2 to 3 times a week. My workouts aren't as difficult as they were, but I'm going. And last week I went 5 times. Even if I'm just getting on the treadmill and I'm running, it's really important for my mental health.
What would you tell somebody who's contemplating a life free of alcohol or drugs? What would you say to them to help them make a decision to change?
You should be doing it because you're ready, not just because I'm sitting here telling you, to do it. If it's impacting your life in a way that, is keeping you from realizing, your purpose on this earth, then I think that you should really look at that, and consider whether that behavior is going to serve you going forward or not. And I think you've got to be ready to make that commitment at the same time.
And you were.
I was, well, that's why I paused, because it was my mom that said, you need to go to AA. I wasn't planning on it, so maybe sometimes you do need a push,
You were it seems like you were getting, I always say, sick and tired, right?
I was very sick and tired.
I'm going to guess that you have a question that you might want Sean to answer.
Yes, I do. I always have questions. I mean, I could talk all night.
I could
I
tell you
believe
by
that.
the look in her eyes. I know I can mind read what she's thinking.
So if you could go back to an earlier stage of life and tell your younger self something, it could be 5 years old, it could be 25 years old. What age do you picture when I say that? The first thing that came to your mind, and what would you say?
I picture myself like 3 years old.
Wow, you can remember 3 years old?
I remember certain moments.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I remember certain moments that were very traumatic, for me. And I would just tell myself it's going to be okay, because that's what I needed to hear, And I don't think either one of my parents could, I don't think they could have told me that enough, or, hearing it from myself would have been nice.
Impactful.
Yeah. Yeah.